Boosting Immunity with Calorie Restriction by Dave Mayo. The purpose of this video is to discuss a new paper on the effects of calorie restriction and the thymus gland. We're going to discuss this new paper first by detailing the results. Then we're going to move along and discuss what the thymus is and what thymic involution is, which is a term you've probably never heard of, but it's a fairly simple concept. Then we're going to discuss the effects of calorie restriction on the thymus gland. We'll touch upon how the gut may play a role, and then we'll finally discuss how much calorie restriction is necessary to get this beneficial effect based on the data in this paper. So this paper is super interesting, and a little background. Calorie restriction has been shown to increase lifespan and health span in lower organisms multiple times. Very hard to measure in humans because we live so long, and so a study that would start now with calorie restriction would have to go decades before we would get a general idea. So if we can see things that happen in humans under calorie restriction that would increase lifespan or make us more robust, then we could get a pretty good idea of whether or not it's working. And what this paper found was that calorie restriction of 14% in humans increased the volume of the thymus gland over a period of 2 years. Actually, it increased the volume of the thymus gland after a year, and that the results remained after 2 years. And this is important because the thymus is critically important for our immune system. It's effectively the training ground of our T cells, which are the assassins and helpers of our immune system. So let's kind of dig in a little bit on what the thymus gland is and what it does for us. So the thymus is an immune gland located in the center of your chest about the size of a chicken wing, and it is essentially the site of T cell development. It functions as a basic training camp for our T cells. So what happens is our bone marrow releases a lymphocyte progenitor cell, which is basically a newborn cell that can be anything it wants to be. These cells make their way to the thymus, and the thymus, the first step is positive selection. It first looks at these cells. Hey, is this cell going to be compatible with our healthy cells? Will it be effective at developing into a T cell? Does it have all the components that a cell would need? And if it does, it continues along. But if that cell is not up to snuff, it's dead. Effectively, it dies in the thymus. The next step is negative selection, and this is looking at the T cell saying, is this T cell going to become autoreactive? Is it going to recognize our healthy tissues as problematic and react to those and cause problems? If that's the case, if this T cell looks like it's going to react to our healthy cells, again, it's terminated within the thymus gland. Therefore, all the cells, or at least the vast majority of the cells that make it through, will develop into healthy T cells that can help our immune system. T helper cells, which support other cells of our immune system by secreting cytokines and helping them identify whether they're fighting something like a bacteria or a virus, effectively what exactly they're reacting to. A T regulatory cell, which kind of acts as a backup, to prevent autoimmunity. And finally, a killer T cell, which seeks and destroys. It's effectively an assassin to viruses and other pathogens in our body. So there are a number of factors that affect the thymus. Some benefit it, some are negatively affect it. The things that negatively affect it, starvation. So we're not talking about calorie restriction. The study is calorie restriction with optimal nutrition. Starvation is effectively malnutrition. That can actually suppress the thymus gland. Chemotherapy, excessive glucocorticoids, aging in pregnancy, which we're going to discuss in a moment. Bacterial and viral infection, that includes endotoxemia. So theoretically, if you have increased intestinal permeability perpetually, you can suppress the thyroid gland. This is temporary. When you clear the infection or improve the permeability, thymus gland goes back to the normal size. Same with the glucocorticoids and pregnancy. And finally, DNA damaging radiation can also reduce the thymus gland. Finally, certain cytokines and different regulatory factors also work on the thymus, but they do so in a thymostimulatory way. In other words, they help bolster the thymus gland and make it work more effectively. Important relationships to look at. Before we do, we got to define a term. Thymic involution is the replacement of healthy functioning thymus tissue with adipose tissue. So in essence, you get a more poorly functioning thymus gland during thymus involution, and that causes problems with thymic function. Aging and obesity lead to thymic involution. There is evidence that when you correct obesity, you correct thymic involution. Endotoxemia, which is the presence of bacteria in the blood. This can happen due to infection or due to increased intestinal permeability. Evidence in mice indicates that when you correct endotoxemia, you correct thymic involution. And it's important to point out when you have a viral infection, this can also cause thymic involution that corrects after you clear the infection. Excessive glucocorticoids such as cortisol lead to thymic involution, although the circadian rhythm of cortisol is essential for proper thymic function. So we're talking here about excessive glucocorticoids through disease or potentially by pharmaceutical intervention. Androgens such as testosterone lead to thymic involution. Pregnancy leads to thymic involution. This is believed to be beneficial. It improves fertility and decreases fetal loss. If you think about a fetus inside the womb, half of that fetus is not self to the woman, so you don't want the immune system attacking the fetus, which is getting half of its genes from the sperm. And finally, other hormones improve thymic volume, growth hormone, leptin, and ghrelin. And it's important to point out that leptin and ghrelin are really messed up during obesity, so these may lead to a synergistic effect with thymic function and decreasing obesity. Here we have age-related thymic involution. This is effectively the only situation where you can consider somebody 17 years old, at least from a thymus perspective. When we're a newborn, our thymus is almost entirely healthy thymic tissue to help us form T cells that can encounter any of the viruses that we will encounter both when we're a newborn and further on late in life. But as we get older, we go through puberty, 17 years old, we see a replacement of healthy thymic tissue with fatty tissue. This may be partially driven by increases in testosterone and androgen. But by the time we're 40 years, about 70% of our thymus is now fat, and it's going to progressively increase the fatty content of our thymus and decrease our thymic performance as we get older. This is just how aging works. Now, this brings us to how calorie restriction improves thymopoiesis, the process of creating healthy thymus tissue. The paper found that 14% calorie restriction in healthy weight adults increased thymic volume. So this is saying these people before calorie restriction, their thymus was actually smaller than it was after 2 years of calorie restriction. But it's important to point out this is 14% from healthy weight maintenance, not your present weight. So if you're severely obese, this study doesn't really pertain to you, but there's ample evidence that decreasing obesity improves thymic function. We just can't say for sure that it's due to thymopoiesis or increased thymic volume. This effect is due to adipose tissue changes. Essentially, this adipose tissue is secreting inflammatory cytokines. This increased level of inflammation decreases thymic volume. So as you decrease the amount of fat, you increase the amount of thymic volume by decreasing inflammation. So to determine the calorie intake that this pertains to, you want to use your height to find your healthy BMI weight. It's going to vary based on height. You're going to multiply that healthy weight by 15, which gives you your calorie maintenance. And then finally, you're going to multiply that calorie maintenance weight by 0.86, which gives you a 14% reduction in calories. So for example, if you were to say, your healthy maintenance weight is 2,000 calories, your proper calorie restricted weight loss at 14% would be 1,720 calories.